It's a novel called The Family Fang, and so after that, I don't expect that there will be anything else in 2011 from me. But the novel is coming. It's a novel about a family whose last name is Fang, hence the title. It's about a family of performance artists. Mother and father are kind of well-known, controversial performance artists who create these public spectacles, and they have these two children, a daughter and a son, who they force to take part in these performances as small children. Made them kind of the focal point of these really bizarre public performances, and now the children have become psychologically damaged by this. And so the novel goes back and forth between the children as adults and kind of ruined people, and then the children when they were children, these flashbacks to the different performances that they would do with their parents. And so it's a novel about family, both the bonds between children and their parents, and then the bond between siblings, and then just what the effect of family is on a life, and the ways in which family ruins you for all, pretty much all intents and purposes they do, whether they mean to or not. It was totally different, and I had not expected that. I had tried and failed on 2 other occasions to write a novel, and one of the things that was really difficult to finally figure out was that with a novel, I love short stories, I love writing them, and I love how compact they are, and I like how they can have the same resonance as a novel in such a short space. And then what I didn't realize, though, is with a novel, the scope is just so broad. You can do so much more in terms of time and space. And so when I was writing the novel, I had to just keep reminding myself not to wrap things up. I kept wanting to put this kind of, every chapter I wanted to be like the end of a short story. I wanted it to have this kind of epiphany and this resolution, and I had to keep reminding myself that the scope's bigger, that I had to do more with it. And so to keep pushing that story further and further to see how much I could get out of this narrative idea, it was really interesting. And I kind of liken it to, like, for me, short stories are like, you get in a car, and the short story is this car, and you just drive it into a tree, and that's it. You get this kind of explosive moment, and you walk away from that car, and that's it. You're done with it. And with the novel, I had to keep reminding myself to just drive as far as I could with this car, to get as many miles as I could out of it before I crashed it, because that's all I wanted to do, was just crash it into a tree so I could be done with it. And I had to keep reminding myself, just go a few more miles and see where it leads you. There's the artifice that you create in your mind, which are the stories and novels, and then there is the real world, and there's everything that goes along with that, which is like, I have a wife, I have a child, I watch a lot of TV, I have a 9-to-5 job, I like to play on the internet. All the other things are the real world, and then there is this place that is really wonderful and that I like to inhabit, that is my brain, the artifice of creating literature, and that's a very small part of my life, and I work really hard to make sure that it's an important part, but you just are constantly trading off on, are you going to play with your son, or are you going to go downstairs to the basement and write? And a lot of times the real world wins out, for better or for worse. I know that if I didn't have a family, and I didn't have a job, and I didn't have a wife, I would write a lot more stuff, but because I have a wife and a kid and a job, the emphasis that I put on writing, that time is really precious, and so I think I actually get better work done. But there's a trade-off, and sometimes it's frustrating, and sometimes you start to resent the things in your life that prevent you from writing. At the same time, I appreciate them, and it's just the constant push and pull, in the same way that most people have to work a job that they don't like to do the things they want to do, so it's not any different, I think, from anybody else. It's just you're constantly figuring out what you're going to give up to get the things that you really want. Yeah, I mean, it used to be so much easier because I just had so much time. It was just, I'd just grab it when I could, and I would wait for the moment that I felt like I had the spark to get working, you know, so I just wait for it. And now, because the time is limited, I just have to sit down and force myself to do it. And in some ways that's more effective, just to know that if you're going to get the work done, you have to sit down and do it. And you can think about it for a long time, but until you actually start getting words down on paper, it doesn't really matter, you know. And so knowing the forcing yourself to do it is the hard part. And then once I actually sit down and start writing, it's wonderful. I remember what I liked about writing, but when I'm not writing, I'm like, oh, I would like to watch some TV right now, and I'm thinking of how wonderful it is to watch TV, and writing seems like this distant thing that's hard to grasp. But then when it's working and you're writing, it's the best thing in the world. I think it's the most important thing. I think you can write and write and write, and whether you get better is debatable. You just may or may not be a good writer, and there are tricks you can learn to get better, but that's debatable. But there is no question that reading a ton will make you more attentive. It will let you understand how fiction works, and it will let you see what you like about other people stylistically, and it will improve your work. The more that I read, the better I got as a writer, because it opened me up to things that I would have never thought about on my own. And you know, a lot of these stories in this collection are weird. There is these elements of magical realism, and if I hadn't read those writers, and if I had just read the more traditional forms of storytelling, I don't think I wouldn't have known how to do it. So, you know, when I started reading Millhauser and George Saunders and even the South American magical realist people, that's when I saw this is how you do it. And then once I saw the framework for it, I could do my own thing. But the reading was the most important thing. I just read constantly. I was reading. In college, I was not doing much of my schoolwork and just reading like a book a day, just trying to figure out what it was that these people were doing. It felt like magic. And I'm astounded by that people say they don't read much, or they've gotten to a point with their own writing that they just have gotten tired of reading books or other work, and I don't. I mean, I always love reading, and sometimes it's the thing when I'm not writing and I feel bad that I'm not producing work, I remind myself that I'm just reading constantly, and that is always opening me up to new things that I wouldn't have known otherwise. You know, I grew up in this county. I grew up at the base of the mountain, and I did not read serious literature at all until I got to college. Before that, all I read were comic books, and I read pulp novels that I could find at garage sales, and I read fantasy novels. I read all these Dragonlance novels and stuff, and that's all I cared about. And the idea that there was contemporary fiction going on, I didn't even know that was happening. It's weird to think of it now, but when I was in junior high and high school, I didn't totally understand that living people wrote fiction, that it existed in the present. I didn't know that was possible. I didn't know that people made a living writing, because I wasn't exposed to it in high school. And it wasn't until I got to college and I started realizing that there are writers right now writing this kind of incredible stuff. So I came to it in a weird way, and my background is such that when other people were reading Shakespeare and Dickens and the Russian novelists and all of that base that you need, I was reading comic books. And there's a huge gap in my reading because of that, because I spent so much time not reading that stuff that I'm just always struggling to catch up. I have colleagues in the English department that they will mention a play by Shakespeare and they just assume you know it. I have no idea what they're talking about. And no one talks about comic books in the English department, so I don't get any credit for that. Yeah. But I have a huge gap in my reading list. But I, it's just the way I came to it.